In the year 1190, a few German salesmen founded the Teutonic Order in Aachen. The Pope quickly promoted them into a holy order to fight the Muslims, though unlike the Knights Templar, the Teutonic Order would not settle in France. In 1231 AD, they set up shop in the Baltic Sea with the goal of Christianizing the heathen natives. Spreading over the Prussian heartland for the next 100 years, they'd constantly clash with the Catholic Poland and the much larger heathen Grand Duchy of Lithuania until 1410. The order suffered a great defeat in the Battle of Tattenberg, marking the beginning of the end. Today we are going to play as Ludwig of Prussia, starting in 1453. Historically, he'd start a war with Poland and lose large swaths of land to the Poles. Can we do better than him? Collecting power, defeating Poland, Lithuania, and realizing the original goal of the Teutonic Order? Or will we also have our own Battle of Tattenberg and fall from grace just as history demanded it? But of course, you don't need to be as defenseless when you browse the web, thanks to our sponsor Surfshark VPN, which allows you to browse the web completely anonymously, using their app or browser extension to put your location to anywhere in the world, to block trackers and protect your data. This also allows you to watch content that's locked to certain countries and even get big deals on products with a simple click of a button. My favourite part is that you can use Surfshark on unlimited devices, allowing you to account share, and if you use code SNAP, you get a massive 83% off and 3 months completely free. So if you share an account with 3 other friends, you'd only have to pay about 50 pence a month each. And after all of that, if you're somehow still not satisfied, Surfshark offer a 30-day money-back guarantee. So thanks a lot to Surfshark for sponsoring this video, and don't forget to use code SNAP or use the link in the description. Ludwig started his command of the Teutonic Order by getting strategic alliances with France and Hungary to hold the Commonwealth off from starting a war anytime soon and wiping them out before Ludwig had a chance to bring his people back after their major defeat. A lot of his land though was still tribal, making it practically useless to Ludwig, so he granted away a lot of land to people who could better manage these domains. Then he had his steward oversee essential construction inside his capital to improve his development, as if he wanted to overthrow and get revenge, a mediocre capital just would not do. Already though, his rivals were getting in Ludwig's way. As his bishop was away in Galindia attempting to create a legal claim to their land, the Commonwealth vassalized them, limiting the power he could one day use to attack them. His steward though had a great suggestion. He came to him and advised him that he had to start making upgrades to his capital. His economy was weak, his people were struggling for food, and they was in no shape to go to war. So Ludwig heavily invested into farms that surrounded his capital, using any leftovers to export for large profits. Just 5 years after he made an alliance with France, they began a war against the Holy Roman Empire, a war between 2 massive European giants. But as the world slowly fell into war, the 6th of July was a day for the order to celebrate. Their rival, King Kazimierz of the Commonwealth, passed away in his sleep, making them weaker and easier for the order to take on. Sadly, with France taking a heavy defeat against the HRE, his strongest ally would be no use anytime soon. But he continued trying to get claims, beginning to bribe the Pope in hopes of being able to get legitimate claims when suddenly Lithuania shattered even more. Now their lands were miles of independent weak counts just ready for the taking. But his own bishop Thackelf was awful, constantly failing over and over again to get usable claims, letting this fantastic opportunity slip. Ludwig though was a true man of God. He had to accept God's plan and keep Thackelf even if it cost him land. But it seemed the near was end anyway. Ludwig became a prisoner in his very own body. Aging was starting to get the better of him. But finally, his bishop got a legitimate claim on Scalovia. So Ludwig ordered his troops to cross the border, present his claim, and slaughter anybody who denied the legitimacy of the claim. They took complete control of their land in just weeks, forcing them to give their land up to the order. Sadly, getting one county though just wasn't enough. Poland-Lithuania managed to act on this opportunity much faster, conquering almost all of their land back before Ludwig even had a chance. He had no time to sit and think about this though, as a personal letter from the Pope arrived, addressed to the Teutonic Order, requesting their support in the upcoming crusade to take Anatolia after the recent collapse of the Ottoman Empire. Of course, Ludwig instantly prepared his troops, ready to take down his enemies and prove the Teutonic Order's worth and earn his place in heaven. The crusade began on the 12th of July 1467. The Order's best men arrived on the enemy shores a year later, led by Ludwig himself. Even through his old age and weakness, he led his troops side by side with his son Otbert, both earning their reputation as crusaders. Unluckily though, his troops were instantly hunted by a large force of over 35,000 men as they scrambled to reach their allies, but it was no use. His entire army was slaughtered, with only himself, his son, and a few of his knights making it out alive, calling an early end to the crusade for Ludwig as his weakness only got worse. And at just 59 years of age, Ludwig passed away, a renowned leader for the Teutonic Order who fought right up until the very end, but sadly not able to live and see the end of the crusade, but set in motion the beginning of a prosperous realm for his people. With his big focus on building, now his only son Otbert would take the Holy Order's reins. He wanted nothing more than to see the end of this crusade, so he gathered all the men he could and set out for revenge. He helped siege, fought in many battles, but it just all seemed useless. By 1472, the Catholics were running out of men, so he took a big risk. He went up north to siege alone, in hopes of creating a small outpost the Catholics could use to resupply. Worryingly, problems didn't stop at home. Golovkin led a populist uprising, taking his best chance against the Order while their army was away, but one thing the Order still had was money, and there was always people willing to fight for the right price. So the uprising was caught by surprise when they met the deadly Prussian band of Skalovia, who caught them from behind in Wolmar and put their archers to use, taking out their entire force before they even had a chance to react. Eventually, the Order managed to siege their target, but their luck didn't last very long, as a flanking army caught them by surprise once again, resulting in a complete slaughter of the Order's troops and sending Otbert home, where he was met with his recently born son, promising his wife not to return to the crusade and instead be there for his son. So instead, he continued his father's plans of upgrading their capital, building a powerful Catholic nation that could one day allow the Catholics to take whatever land they desired. As expected, Otbert soon started to miss his crusading days. Unable to return due to his promise, he invested in military academies to train the next generation of fierce warriors who would hopefully bring his son Karl great success. By 1482, the tide started to turn. The Muslim troops were running low, their lands were being captured, and it was only a matter of time. Of course, Otbert couldn't resist acting on this news, so he left his wife and children at home to go and fight. But sadly, before he even had a chance of fighting, he passed away at 57 years of age. Word eventually reached the Order's capital, and then Karl ascended to the throne at just 8. His first major act as Duke was to allow a fellow Holy Order to use one of his baronies for a nice sum of money that would be used to feudalise Wamir. Shortly after, on the 6th of December 1485, Aytekin pulled back the Muslim troops from the crusade. The Catholics were successful and the kingdom of Anatolia was liberated. Due to his father's and grandfather's great efforts, Karl's sister was made the Duchess of Cappadocia. Not everything was going great though. Karl's own vassal Hardwin beat him with a club, causing Karl a life of paranoia. But that night, Karl swore one day he would get revenge on Hardwin's awful acts. Eventually, the Prussian bishop managed to get a claim on all of Pomelia, giving Karl a goal of his own to achieve. But he knew if he wanted to take it, he needed a much bigger and stronger army. So to achieve this, he upgraded his father's military academies to produce even better troops. And not long after that, Karl finished his education, a well-taught man who would strive to lead his people to great success, and his wife Valentina by his side for the entire way. Worryingly for the Order though, his family's greatest rivals spread far enough to be recognised as an empire. Each day their power seemed to get further and further away, and the Order needed to act quick. So with the death of the previous Livonian leader, he married his newly born daughter to secure a powerful ally, invested into his own armies, then Karl declared war for his claim. The Order's new bombards shredded enemy walls, causing chaos and ultimately allowing them to gain land quickly. The Battle of Hillsberg was a loss that sealed the deal for Livonia, where 6,000 of their men were caught running and stood no chance against the Order's elite. Even through success, Karl's paranoia from his childhood traumas spiraled out of control. He eventually turned to drink in a way to manage his stress, as he was just too embarrassed to speak about it. But Karl achieved something his family previously failed to do, as finally, in 1496, the Teutonic Order's lands were recognized as a kingdom. And with this new title came a lot more responsibility, but equally a lot more power. The neighbouring Commonwealth, noticing this, now decides to send an envoy, demanding the Order to hand over a woman who had a legal claim on some of their land, hoping to remind Karl exactly where he stands. But Karl was not a weak man. He laughed the envoy away, reminding his enemies that they would stand and fight no matter what. One day, an older woman wandered into his court, talking about all these dark ways to torture. So, of course, he sponsored the woman to write a book on the most evil methods possible. So, the Book of Crime and Punishment was created and put on display in his court for all to see, a small threat to those who may think about betraying the Order. In 1499 AD, Karl declared his first war, a small war to test his units and take control over the grand city of Chelm. Once again, his bombards resulted in a quick capture of the city. His enemies, though, didn't surrender just yet. They tried to return the favour and began sieging the Order's capital, but it didn't last very long once they was completely surrounded and slaughtered. The same year, after having 4 daughters in a row, a blessing arrived. His twin sons were born, Ludwig and Cyrus, who would one day work side by side in attempting to take down the Poland-Lithuania Commonwealth. He then married 2 of his daughters, securing 2 major alliances with France and Norway, and then he bought a claim on the Duchy of Estonia. But first, he had to take his revenge. Hardwin, his childhood abuser, still held land inside his realm, a mere vassal of a vassal. So, Karl made him his own vassal, used the Order's religious connections to the Pope to get Hardwin excommunicated, then sent his men to arrest him. Hardwin, of course, refused this act of tyranny, raised his troops up, hoping for support from his fellow vassals, but it was a holy order. Who would dare stand up for someone so evil the Pope personally excommunicated them? Karl wanted to lead the troops himself. He was no warrior though. He ended up being severely injured and disfigured by Hardwin himself for the second time. Luckily for Karl, Hardwin was stopped before he could end his life and was captured by his personal guard. There was, of course, always another reason Karl wanted that book, a reason that nobody could know. He put these newly found methods to use over the course of a week. Hardwin was left a mangled mess. Through all the pain, he even admitted he was a cannibal, thinking that would stop Karl, but no. Every day, Hardwin was forced to relive that pain he made a very young Karl feel, until he finally passed away in the dungeons where he would be left to rot. Karl, now unrecognizable with a metal mask covering his face. A changed man who was sick of waiting around. He wanted the Baltics and he wanted them now. So he declared war against Livonia for his claims on Estonia. His troops surrounded their capital, while his Norwegian allies besieged the surrounding settlements, truly leaving Livonia with no option but to surrender Estonia over to them. Just in time as his 2 sons come of age, both excelling at their education, a letter from the Pope arrived for Karl, asking once again for the Order's support in an upcoming crusade, this time for Jerusalem. Karl marched his troops to the Holy Land without hesitation, but his enemies remember the previous defeat. This time they was prepared. The shores were lined with tens of thousands of men, waiting for the first boat to arrive, and as quick as Karl's men landed, they were caught by a massive force. Karl returned home, re-equipped another army ready to go fight, then 2 years later set sail to go back. But before he could even reach Jerusalem, the Pope admitted defeat and called off the crusade. This was a massive loss for the Catholics and made the Teutonic Order look incredibly weak. So he returned home once more, and for the next few years spent his time peacefully building up his lands, as he had almost complete control over the Baltics and knew soon he would have to go face to face with one of the biggest empires in the world. There was still one target left to get first though, Lithuania, who was weak, and if the Order didn't take their lands, the Commonwealth would. So Karl went on a pilgrimage to prove his worth to the Pope, and then he bought a claim on all of Lithuania's land. They bought mercenaries, called allies, but still, it was no use against the Order's best men. Men who had lived through the horrors of the crusade. They walked through the larger enemy force with ease, ruining any hope they had of keeping their land. Karl knew his time was close. He was aging and had to sort out his children, so Cyrus was given complete control of Pomelia and removed from the line of succession. Cyrus completely understood this though and held no ill will against his father, who was just trying to do what's best for their people. Later that year, his own bodyguard Jacob comes to him, acting incredibly suspicious, suggesting that the king always carry his axe and increase his guard patrols. And after a short back and forth, Jacob admits Countess Adaletta has managed to bribe many of Karl's guards and that she was planning an attack on his life. So he hired Venno and Count Iwo, two trusted men, to always watch his back. And just as warned, one day Adaletta calmly walks into his throne room, slowly approaching as she pulls out a weapon and attempts to murder Karl. Venno and Iwo jump to his defense, throwing her to the ground and the king putting her under arrest, where she would spend the rest of her life. But it seemed Karl was just destined to die one way or another, as not long after he passed away due to his lifelong drinking problems. Now Ludwig took the throne, an honest man who had a reputation for saying everything, but he had a secret plan. A plan made between him and his brother. A plan that would cut the Commonwealth from the rest of the world, allowing him to take them down once and for all. His plan started once he managed to negotiate an alliance with the HRE, completely blocking the Commonwealth's western borders and strengthening his own army by hiring over 1,000 new crossbowmen. His future heir Adolf was born, who was married off to Eva, another big ally in Hungary, and his final ally would be Novgorod. With all this set up, it seemed his plan was coming along perfectly. All of these marriages were also kept completely secret by Karl's demands, so his enemies had no idea just how much trouble they were in. Karl then went on a pilgrimage before the war to show his loyalty to God. Then he got a claim on the whole empire. The 7th of June, 1545, King Ludwig of the Teutonic Order declared war to take the entire empire. This may be his only chance to fulfill his dynasty's goal. He raised his best men in his capital and commanded them himself, while his levies were commanded by the same man who saved his father's life, Venno. Luckily, his allies all agreed to help him take down their rivals. This left the Commonwealth hopeless, with nowhere near enough troops to hold a strong defense against each border, allowing thousands of troops to flood into their territory and begin sieging their lands. The Polish troops did manage to catch a smaller unit of the HRE's troops alone, but as soon as the Teutonic Order's reinforcements arrived, the battle quickly went into their favour, leaving the empire defenseless as their best men were slaughtered. Just 2 quick years after the war was declared, it ended. The strategic alliances allowed total domination on the battlefield, and Ludwig was crowned as a mighty Kaiser of the Teutonic Order. His family went from mere merchants in Akon to securing the Baltics from the heathens, defeating their longest standing rival, and creating the Teutonic Order Empire. An empire whose foundation is built on defending and spreading their Catholic beliefs across the world. But thank you all so much for watching. I hope you did enjoy. If you have any other ideas for like a scripted sort of storyline again, or any feedback on how I could improve these, it is honestly very welcome. And of course, I gotta say a massive thank you to the channel members. We have Intermio1, Endulus, and Victor Voss Anderson. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.